My name is Lucy and you're watching the show with Dear Frank.
So last night I had one of those dreams where I really had to get somewhere, but I was stuck and people were walking by me and I couldn't move. And in the past, I've just dropped down on my knees and tried to crawl as hard as I could. And those dreams suck, right? But last night I had this epiphany where if I moved my ankles and my calves really, really hard, I could move quickly. And soon I was passing people by on this hill that I was going up. And I suddenly woke up and realized that my feet were pressing against the board at the end of my bed like a cat needs a pillow. Yeah, it's probably a stress dream, and someone said that I'm working too hard, and that's a phrase that's always kind of confused me. We keep throwing it into sentences. It's not work pays off, it's hard work pays off. And what does that mean, hard? One problem in all of this that comes to mind is that our definition of work is often quite different than our experience of work. And when I think about hard work, I think about my experience of doing work, and specifically my tolerance for doing things that are uncomfortable, because without the discomfort, why would it be hard? You know, I wanted to tell this clean story of looking back on my youth and how when I was young I sucked at this kind of uncomfortable work, of how I kind of half-assed a job I had cleaning up a movie theater and threw up into a bucket of empty popcorn, a combination of a hangover and that acrid smell of butter. But that's not true. I worked my ass off every morning in the art room, showing up early and sketching my hand and whatever else was available. At that time, I think the hardness of my work was always in the framework of being rewarded in a very clear and precise way by an authority figure or a grade. When I hit my 20s, I was confronted with the question of not how hard should I work, but how hard can I work? I'd certainly worked hard, but I had no idea what my limits were. I should say that I got my first real job when I was 27, having spent the early part of my 20s touring in a rock band. Any lessons I learned about work then are negated by the fact that I don't really remember much. Kids stay in school. On that job, I was confronted with a force of nature. One of the people that I worked for would put in 30-hour days, and so I would put in 30-hour days. That was uncomfortable. Around 24 hours in, my digestive system seemed to want to practice learning how to speak. I'll let you figure out what that means. But I owe a lot to him. He'd helped me find my 100%, and I realized that the trick to working was figuring out how to never have to work your 100%. I took the philosophy to heart and worked my ass off on my own, and when I taught a course at NYU, I inflicted the same methodology on my students. Find your 100%, I would say in a smug way, and I gave them assignments every single day, weekends, holidays, it didn't matter. And here's the rub. Years later, I found out that that person, the one that I'd modeled my creative habits after, was going through a bit of a cocaine addiction at the time. Kids stay in school, but at this point it was sort of too late. I'd modeled my entire work habits around discomfort, around anxiety, like I had to be anxious for it to mean something. And in order to drive myself along without grades or tangible rewards for my efforts, I developed a rich inner fantasy life. I became okay with the discomfort as long as it was on the path to some wondrous unknown future. This is around the time that I heard the words puer aeternus, or the eternal child, or the child god. Something that Jung calls a neurosis. You can sort of sum it up by saying you don't want to grow up. Like you never got the memo on 1 Corinthians 13 when it says, "When I became an adult, I set aside my childish ways." Which ways? Let me read you some of the symptoms of the puer aeternus and see if a fork doesn't stick into your stomach. 1. Have great difficulty in finding the right kind of job. 2. Having the charm of youth and the stirring quality of a drink of champagne. 3. A secret thought that one day one will be able to save the world. 4. A rich inner fantasy life. 5. A fear of being pinned down, caught in a situation from which it will be impossible to slip out again. 6. Every just so situation is hell. The feeling of a provisional life, the feeling that one is not yet in real life, that life is not yet what is really wanted, and there is always a fantasy that sometime in the future, the real thing will come about. It's Peter Pan, it's the Little Prince, Dionysus, and it's vicious. And you know Jung, when he was asked, what is the cure for such a person? He said, work. Is it that simple? Yes. Work. And by that I think he meant hard work, specifically doing the things that make you feel uncomfortable and tolerating it. Tolerating crawling slowly on the ground in your dream. What about you? Have you found your 100%? Don't actually use that as a model.